Okay, welcome to the latest Democracy 4 developer video blog thing. I'm going to talk about the stuff that I've been working on recently. There was not a video last week because I was not here. I was on holiday, which is very unlike me, but only for 4 days. So there you go. I'm going to talk about a few new things that have happened. There's a few kind of really minor things, like this does this now. These are kind of like minor little bits of polishy stuff that I do at the weekends, which I quite enjoy working on, but they're kind of just fluff really. So hopefully this build won't crash. We just fixed some bugs, but if it does crash I will just restart. So I'm going to start a new game. This is placeholder stuff from Democracy 3 that won't actually be in the game. It won't look like that. This is the default look of the game. So you have an option to play in dark mode, just reminding people that you can play like this. There's an option up here to change things from light to dark, and we'll have other palettes as well. So quite a few little things have changed. We're kind of experimenting with how to improve the layout of the game and make it kind of more obvious how it's played. So one of the things we decided to do is we used to have this indicator here for political capital up there, and I don't think we've ever really made it in earlier versions of the game that apparent and that obvious how important political capital is. Political capital is basically power. Okay, now you are president or prime minister, but you may be a really powerful president like Vladimir Putin who can kind of do whatever he wants, or you can be like the recent Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Theresa May, who had a very small majority and not much public support and very little power. And that makes a huge difference because everything you do in the game requires power. If I want to implement a new policy or change the law, that requires power, and it will require a different amount depending how big a deal it is. If you want to change the amount of money that the government spends on bus tickets, nobody really cares. If you want to outlaw abortion or legalize abortion if it isn't already, everyone cares, and you will need more power to do that. So we now put this in the middle, and I think that works better. Ignore the poor formatting of that tooltip. It's on our to-do list. So it'll get fixed. So this is now in the middle, and I currently have 26. Currently have 26 political capital. And the other thing that we've done is we put the ministers here, and we've put them in here for several reasons. Firstly, you can see these lines that will be more obvious later, and they show you that this is where political power is coming from. So all of these people are generating political capital for you, and they are your ministers. The other thing that I think we're making more obvious with this is that each minister is in charge of a certain kind of department. So this is this down here is tax, this is the economy, this is welfare, foreign affairs, transport, law and order, and public services. So each of them has a minister, and some of those ministers are more loyal than others, some of them are more capable than others. So if I click on this one, they have average loyalty, which means they're not going to be generating that much political power for us, not much experience, generally not very effective, and a pretty bad campaigner. This is a bad minister. We should get rid of them really. The other thing is they have sympathies with certain voter groups. So if I hover over them, you'll see that she is basically moderately happy about our policies on commuters, because she kind of identifies with the commuters, and she's pretty unhappy with middle income voters, or rather she's pretty unhappy on behalf of middle income voters. There's not much difference between the two. If I pick another one here, so it's religious and conservatives that are influencing this guy. So he's fairly happy, hence the green line, with the way our government is treating conservatives, not so happy with the way we're treating the religious, and that will affect their loyalty. Other things will affect their loyalty as well. If I sack one of them, that will make all the rest of them slightly less loyal because they will feel less confident. You can see that's a minister that's really happy there, because the way we're treating the poor are really happy right now. with all of the stuff we're doing. She's a sympathetic minister. She's quite happy. So the other thing is, I mentioned effectiveness. So effectiveness is kind of variable here. So the effectiveness of each minister is an impact on how effective all their policies are. So this is the welfare minister. So the effectiveness here is 45%, about average. So this, because it's below 50%, this is not a particularly brilliant minister. So the costs of all of our welfare programs are 1% higher than they should be. The effects are 8% lower than they should be, and the time to implement them is 8% higher than they should be. In other words, this minister, because this minister is not very good, this means our state housing policy is not as good as it could be. I could replace that minister. And if we go down to tax, you'll see here, again, not particularly good. So we're getting 2% less income than we should from all of our tax. And that's just because of incompetence. It's easier to avoid your tax. We're not kind of chasing up on stuff like that as well as we should be. So ministers really matter, and that's why we've decided to move them here, or rather add them here. And I think this is a good design change because it also reinforces the fact that everything affects everything else. I haven't set all the lines up correctly here, but basically ministers generate political capital, and voter groups affect how ministers feel and how kind of loyal they are and stuff like that. So this is a new thing, to have this here and to have that here. Now, there's a UI problem that means that sometimes some of these things overlap this middle icon. I'll show you what I mean if I force these icons to move around like this. This is a fairly new thing. We only just fixed, well, Jeff fixed it yesterday, the kind of snapping of sizes that supports all this kind of stuff. I love this, and I really want this to be a bigger deal. I tend to go with influence because I think that's one of the best things. Anyway, loads of other things have changed for the better. You'll notice that when I hover over these things, the lines are now different thicknesses in some cases, as well as going faster. So the line from car usage here to traffic congestion up there is thick as well as fast. It's just another way of reinforcing how these effects are different. There's other stuff that I've done. There's loads of minor things. We have some new nationalisation policies that what they will do is they kind of kill off the private sector. So here's rail usage, and we have a rail industry here. If I can nationalise the railways now, we have new policies for stuff like this. Where would that be? That would be transport, obviously. So state rail company, if I implement the state rail company, it will actually sort of kill off the private industry, and that icon will disappear completely. And you can reverse the process as well. So you can you can nationalise and you can privatise certain industries. I think we've got rail, telecoms, water, energy. I think that's it. We might have some more. I'm not sure. I added a new connection. It was international trade, which is here. International trade now affects CO2 emissions, which it doesn't in Democracy 3. Now, obviously, it really should do, right? Because if everything is getting shipped all over the world, especially if you're shipping raw materials from A to B, B makes components and ships them back to A in order to make a gadget that then gets exported back to B or whatever. That's a lot of shipping, and therefore that's going to increase CO2 emissions. Now, you might think, and I would agree, that the benefits of free trade and the benefits of international trade outweigh their contribution to CO2 emissions, as long as we sort of work to reduce that. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing, and this is an important point in the design of this game. Nothing in the game is bad, nothing in the game is good, it just affects what it affects. We're trying not to be judgmental on anything. We will fail on that, but we will try. So some new stuff has gone in. Yeah, I've changed the kind of minister stuff. So it used to be if you did a lot of reshuffling, you'd run out of ministers. That can never happen. But what happens is the quality of them goes down, which makes sense because if all of the people who want to be a politician are sort of lined up, some of them are really skilled and some of them are just idiots and maniacs. So as you go through people, if you go through through people too quickly, you'll end up scraping the bottom of the barrel in terms of ministers. So that's a new thing. What else is new? What else has Cliff done? Frantically looks at calendar. Blah 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 blah. Oh yeah, we have a gender transition policy, and we have a privacy law and a right to die policy. These are all new things. I can't think where they would be actually. They might be under not public services, I guess. In fact, some of those will already be in because I'm playing as the UK, aren't I? So right to privacy is a new thing. This is basically the GDPR, which was an EU law. And yeah, we have like a gender transition policy, which, again, it has a slider. And the reason it has a slider is these things really are on a scale, right? So you may have countries that are very religious and old-fashioned and may just believe that kind of no, you cannot change gender. Obviously, that's ridiculous. And at the other hand, at the other end of the scale, you would have that it is self-identified without requiring a doctor to agree a change, and that the state absolutely agrees that you've changed gender, and would therefore, if you went to prison, you'd go to a prison of that gender. And there's all these gaps in between. I know that's going to be controversial because anything on this topic is controversial. So we have a right to die as well, which is, like, speaking personally, I think it's a really important policy. I have reasons in my own family. I've seen, a parent really suffer, and I strongly support the right to die. I think it's ridiculous that we don't have the right to die, or the right to ask people to help us to die. But your mileage may vary, and I know a lot of people for religious reasons oppose that, and it is an issue. It's an issue that isn't discussed that much in kind of like mainstream politics, but it's definitely a policy, because some countries in Europe have a right to die, other countries do not. We do not have it in the UK. Yeah, well, we have no right to control our end of life here in the UK. So that's something that I think was really missing and needed to go into the game. There's a few other policies that are on my list to go in. So I have a little list here. Prison overcrowding, I think, should be a situation. Prison regimes, from harsh to kind of touchy-feely, should be in. Reforestation should be a policy to fight climate change. I think that should be in there, to have some nice little tree icons or something. So I've been fiddling around with kind of like little user interfacey things like these buttons getting bigger as you mouse over them. This is just like little fun kind of like polishy things that I think is worth doing. And there's a lot of things like these. You'll see those things filling up as we select them and stuff like that. I think stuff like that matters, and the thing is, people, when they're sort of discussing the development of a game, will always sort of say, nobody cares about that, nobody cares. But it does help to have a nice, slick user interface, I think. It really does make a difference to kind of like the user experience, as it were. Oh, state broadcaster is another thing that we're going to put in. This would be the BBC in the UK. I think the US has NPR, it's National Public Radio. I think that's publicly owned, isn't it? I don't think you have like a state TV company. But in the UK, a lot of people don't realise this if you're not in the UK. We have a state broadcaster, which is the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation. And they have a website, and they have TV and radio, multiple radio stations, and multiple TV channels. It's kind of a huge organisation, and it's not funded through taxation. It's funded through a fee, a TV license. If you wish to operate a television, you will require a license from the government in order to operate said machinery. And even if you never watch the BBC and hate the BBC and never listen to the BBC or visit the BBC website, you still need one if you want to watch a commercial channel if it's live. If it's not live, you don't need one, and this is where it gets complicated and ridiculous. But ultimately, we do send people to prison for having a TV without a license. There's a whole area of debate around whether or not that's a good idea or bad idea or whatever. But it's not a policy in the game, so that needs to go in as a policy in the game. What else have I got coming up in the next week? Yeah, I think I am going to put business confidence in there, and I think sacking ministers should lead to some slight dip in business confidence, because it never gives you that much confidence in a government if you know, that government seems to be tearing itself apart. So we need to do that. What else have I got? I've got a load of like content that is going to be going in soon, in terms of events and stuff. I'm going to try and introduce a policy, and we've had loads of crash bugs and loads of things that don't work and stuff like that. Let me try and introduce a policy. This will be fun, and see if it crashes. If it crashes, this is pre-alpha, so don't think anything of it. What were we looking at that I was going to put in? It was welfare stuff, wasn't it? No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Frequent flyers. Let's introduce a frequent flyers. We're going to introduce a frequent flyer tax for fleeting use of flying equipment. I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so that worked. And all of the icons like move around in order to make way for it. Where did it go? Where did it go? Where's tax? Oh, here it is. Here it is. Yeah. So it should have grey lines because it's not actually implemented yet. Okay, let's go to the next turn and see if it crashes. It's going to crash, isn't it? I can sense it. Oh, God, damn you. So anyway, a lot of like small user interface things have been worked on and been fixed in the last few weeks, and we have new policies that are going in, and there will be a lot of rebalancing of stuff and a lot of tweaking of stuff. I know in response to the last video, a lot of people were saying yes, population needs to be modelled, population really needs to be in there. I think you're right, and I have put a note in to add that at some point. I can't see the exact thing on my calendar, but I know it is in there. So yeah, we are going to do that. I need to put in all of the artwork for events and all of the sound effects for events and stuff like that. And we need to work on the way we're rendering stuff, because at the moment it's really slow. It's only one little thing. We just need to get around to fixing it, and then everything will be like super smooth and classy. So hopefully next time when I do a video, we may have done that kind of like little speed up, and I'll also have fixed a bunch of other little crash bugs when going to next turns and stuff like that. And I'll be able to talk about what we've got coming up. Anyway, we're still working on the game, obviously. I want to know what you think about this. I want to know what you think about this, right? Do you like this thing that the ministers are in there, or do you hate it? Does it make it clearer how this sort of stuff works? I really like it. I think it does. We still have this screen. Don't forget to do everything if you want to play about with the cabinet. But I do think it helps to clarify who is who and what they're doing. Let me know what you think about that, or any other thoughts or comments you have about the game and what we're doing to it. And I should see you next week. Thank you for watching.